So this is what you're doing in my house? He told me you people were separated. In my house? No, don't do that. You knew. Stand up, take your things. You have 3 minutes.
What are you doing here?
I knew it.
I did not scream. I did not cry. I just stood there and watched my whole life collapse in slow motion. The woman in my bed looked me dead in the eye, pulled my husband's shirt tighter around her body, and said, "He told me you two were separated." 7 words. That is all it took to turn me from a wife into a fool. My name is Inena. I am 31 years old. I teach primary school in Lekki. I wake up before the sun. I pray on my knees every single morning. I cook fresh soup every weekend. I iron my husband Stanley's shirt with my own 2 hands, including the blue one currently wrapped around another woman's body in my bedroom. That Tuesday in November, I was not supposed to be home. I had gone for my school's 2-day staff retreat in Ikoyi, but by afternoon, something in my chest would not let me rest. Not hunger, not tiredness, something deeper. The kind of feeling that starts in your belly and climbs slowly into your throat. The kind only a woman who has been betrayed before can recognize. Except this time, I had ignored every single sign for months. I told my colleague Tracy I was not feeling well. I took a bus home. I did not call Stanley. Something in me, God, instinct, whatever you want to call it, told me not to. I opened the front door with my key. The living room was dim. 2 plates were in the sink. 2, not 1. And the bedroom door was not fully closed. I pushed it open. And there she was, Sonia. From our church, 2nd row in the choir. The woman who hugged me every Sunday and called me my sister in the Lord. She was sitting up in my bed, wrapped in Stanley's favorite blue shirt, the one I had ironed the previous Sunday morning, staring at me with no shame, no panic, just a cold, calculating look that told me this was not her first time in that room. The shower was running in the bathroom. Stanley was in there, completely unaware that his 2 worlds had just collided. The room smelled of her perfume, heavy, expensive, the kind I could never afford on a teacher's salary. Her designer handbag, the one she paraded around church every Sunday, sat on the floor right next to my bathroom slippers. 2 wine glasses were on my bedside table, my side, like I had been permanently removed from my own life and she had simply moved into the space I left behind. I looked at her. She looked at me. And then, God forgive me, I felt something shift inside me that I have never felt before or since. It was not sadness. It was not even anger. It was the death of something. The death of the woman I had been trying so hard to be. The patient wife, the prayerful wife, the quiet, enduring, long-suffering wife that Pastor Gideon preached about every 3rd Sunday. That woman died right there in that bedroom. And the woman who stepped forward into that bedroom, she was someone else entirely. I cleared my throat. Sonia flinched. And I said, with a calmness that shocked even me, "Get out of my house. You have 3 minutes." The bathroom door opened. Stanley stepped out in a towel. And when he saw me, the color left his face like someone had pulled a plug from his soul. I looked at him for a long time, at the man I had married 6 years ago, at the man I had defended to my mother, to my sisters, to everyone who whispered warnings I refused to hear, at the man for whom I had quietly ended a pregnancy 3 years ago because the timing was not right, his words, not mine, and carried that grief alone every single day since. I looked at him and I felt nothing. That was the most terrifying part. Nothing. Let me tell you about Stanley Donatus Okafor, because you need to understand who this man really was before you judge how the story ends. Stanley was the kind of man that mothers pointed at in church and said, that is the kind of man you should marry. Tall, neat, soft-spoken in public. He had a good job at a telecoms company in Victoria Island, drove a clean Toyota Camry, and always sat in the front row during Sunday service with his Bible open and his tie straight. He proposed to me at my mother's house in Enugu, got down on one knee in front of my entire family. My mother wept, my aunties ululated, my father shook his hand for 5 full minutes. It was the kind of proposal that women screenshot and sent to their friends. I was 25. I was in love. I was completely blind. The first sign came 8 months into our marriage. A text message I was not supposed to see. A name saved as Tunde from office that replied with 3 heart emojis at 11:30 at night. I asked him. He laughed, told me I was being insecure, that Tunde was a male colleague, and I was embarrassing myself with my suspicion. I apologized. I apologized to the man who was cheating on me. That tells you everything about who I was back then. The second sign was money. Unexplained withdrawals from our joint account. Small amounts at first. 5,000 here, 10,000 there, then bigger. I brought it up gently, the way Pastor Gideon's wife taught us in the women's fellowship. Approach your husband with a soft spirit and a quiet mouth. Stanley told me he was handling a business situation and that a wife who monitored her husband's finances was a wife who did not trust God's plan for her home. I backed off again. The third sign was Sonia herself. She joined our church about 2 years ago. Flora and I noticed her immediately, not because she was troublesome, but because she was the kind of woman that a room notices. She was light-skinned, well-dressed, confident. She drove herself to church in a Prado Jeep. She did not look like she needed anything from anybody. She gravitated towards Stanley fast, too fast. But whenever I mentioned it, Stanley said I was being a jealous, faithless wife and that Christian brothers and sisters could have friendships without it becoming something dirty. He said it with such conviction that I started to wonder if the problem was me. Flora, my closest friend, the one person who had been watching all of this from the beginning, pulled me aside one day after service and said, "Nena, open your eyes. That woman does not come to that church to worship God." I told Flora she was being dramatic. 3 weeks later, I found Sonia in my bedroom. Now, here is the part that cut the deepest. After Sonia gathered her things that night and walked out, she did not even rush. She took her time like a woman who knew she would be back. Stanley sat on the edge of the bed and looked at his hands for a long time. Then he looked up at me and said, "Nena, I am sorry you had to see that. Not, I am sorry I did this. Not, I am sorry I destroyed your trust. I am sorry you had to see that." Like I was a child who accidentally walked in on something adult. Like the problem was my eyes, not his actions. I sat in the plastic chair in the corner of the room, the chair I used when I was breastfeeding our plans of having children that never came because the timing was never right. And I listened to Stanley explain himself. He talked for 40 minutes. I did not interrupt once. He said Sonia had started as a friend, that she was going through a difficult divorce, that they had grown close, that it just happened, as if sin is a car accident, something that occurs to innocent people without warning. He said I had become distant, that I was too focused on my job and my mother and my problems, that a man had needs. that he had tried to talk to me about his feelings, but I never listened. And then, the one that sat inside my chest like a stone for weeks, he said, "You are a good woman, Nena, but sometimes good is not enough." I got up, walked to the kitchen, drank a full glass of water, came back, looked at him, and said, "Pack a bag. You are sleeping in the guest room tonight." He was shocked. He expected tears. He expected begging. He expected the version of me that apologized for his sins. But that woman, as I told you, died in the doorway. By Thursday, the whole church knew. I do not know who talked. I suspect it was Sonia herself, because women like Sonia understand that information is power, and she wanted to control the story before I did. Pastor Gideon called me into his office on Friday morning. He was seated behind his large desk with his Bible open and his reading glasses low on his nose, and he looked at me the way a disappointed father looks at a child who has brought shame to the family. He said, "Sister Nena, I have heard some disturbing things. I want to hear your side." I told him everything, calmly, from the beginning. The text messages, the money, the warnings I ignored, the night I came home and found Sonia in my bed, Stanley's 40-minute explanation, all of it. Pastor Gideon listened, nodded slowly. Then he folded his hands on the Bible and said, "Sister, I hear your pain, but I want you to consider something. A man strays when the garden at home is not tended. Have you been a present, attentive wife to Brother Stanley?" The air in that office changed. I looked at this man who had married us, who had prayed over our home, who had collected tithes from my teacher's salary every single month, and I understood in that moment that I had never been a member of his church. I had been a prop, a well-dressed, well-behaved prop that made his marriage seminars look successful. I stood up, thanked him for his time, and walked out. His secretary, Rebecca, caught my eye as I passed her desk. She was a quiet woman, mid-40s, always gentle. She looked at me with an expression I will never forget. Not pity, but recognition, like she had sat across that same desk herself once and received the same words. She squeezed my hand briefly and said nothing. That small squeeze carried more church than anything Pastor Gideon had said in 6 years. Outside, my phone was ringing. It was my mother. Someone had called her too. My mother lived in Enugu, but she had ears everywhere, and the moment she heard, she did what Nigerian mothers do. She called everyone in the family and then called me last, which meant by the time I picked up, I was already the subject of a family meeting I had not been invited to. "Nena," she said, in that voice she used when she had already made a decision. "You will not leave that marriage. Do you hear me? You will not embarrass this family. Whatever Stanley did, you will forgive it and move forward. That is what marriage is." I held the phone for a long time. Then I said, "Mama, he brought a woman into my bed, into my house. She was wearing his shirt." Silence. Then, "Did he beat you?" "No." "Is he feeding you?" "Mama, then you have a husband, Nena. Many women do not. You fix it, you pray, you do not run." She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my car outside the church for 23 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the dashboard the whole time, trying to breathe normally, trying to hold myself together with both hands. Then Flora called. "Where are you?" she said. "Church parking lot." "Stay there. I am coming." Flora arrived in 12 minutes. She got into my passenger seat, looked at my face, and did not say a single word. She just reached over and held my hand. We sat like that for a long time. Finally, she said, "You already know what you need to do, Nena. You have known since Tuesday night. The only question is whether you are brave enough to do it. And that one quiet question from my best friend was the one that changed everything. This is the moment in every woman's story where she either shrinks back into the silence or finds something inside herself she did not know was there. I want to tell you something about quiet women. The world underestimates them badly. People see a woman who does not shout, who does not throw things, who does not perform her pain for an audience, and they assume she's weak. They assume she's confused. They assume she can be managed. Stanley made that mistake. Pastor Gideon made that mistake. Even my own mother made that mistake. I am a primary school teacher. I have spent 10 years learning how to observe, how to watch a classroom of 32 children and know, without a single child saying a word, exactly who is lying, who is hurting, and who is hiding something. That skill does not stay in the classroom. It comes home with you. And so, in the 2 weeks after I found Sonia in my bed, while Stanley was living in the guest room, apologizing every morning over breakfast and sending me long voice notes about how he wanted to fix things, I was watching and digging and learning. The first thing I found was the second phone. It was in his car, tucked under the driver's seat inside a small black pouch I had never noticed before. I found it on a Saturday morning when I went to get something from the glove compartment. The phone was a simple Android, nothing fancy, but what was on it was not simple at all. Sonia and Stanley had been together for 18 months. 18 months, a year and a half. The entire duration of their communication was on that phone. Messages, voice notes, photos, and something that stopped my heart completely. A bank transaction screenshot. Stanley had sent Sonia 300,000 naira in January. He had told me that month that things were tight at work and we needed to cut down on spending. That was the same month I stopped buying the moisturizer I liked because it was too expensive. I sat in that car for a long time holding that phone. Then I opened my own phone and called my younger sister, Clara. Clara is not like me. Clara is a Lagos woman in the truest sense. She is sharp, she is loud when she needs to be, and she knows people. She works in real estate and has connections I have never fully understood. When I told her what I had found, she did not gasp. She did not say, "Are you sure?" She said, "Send me everything. I will handle the next part." What Clara found in the following week rearranged the entire story. Sonia was not going through a divorce as Stanley had told me. Sonia's husband, a wealthy businessman named Thompson, who spent most of his time between Lagos and London, was very much still married to her, fully, happily on his end. He had no idea. Sonia was not a struggling woman looking for emotional support. Sonia was a woman who had been doing this for years. There had been someone before Stanley. Clara found him too, a married man from Abuja who ended things abruptly 18 months ago, right around the time Sonia joined our church. The timing was not a coincidence. Sonia had come to our church specifically. She had researched it. She had found a community of comfortable, married, church-going men who believed that their good reputation protected them. Men who thought their wives were too godly and too trusting to ever look closely. She had chosen Stanley because he was exactly her type, charming, image-conscious, and deeply afraid of conflict. When Clara laid all of this out for me on a Sunday afternoon over jollof rice in her kitchen, I put my spoon down. "Her husband does not know?" I asked. "Thompson," Clara said, "he is completely in the dark." I thought about that for a long time. Then I thought about the 300,000 naira. Then I thought about the pregnancy I ended 3 years ago because Stanley said the timing was not right. And how Sonia, I had now discovered through her own social media posts, had been pregnant around the same time and lost the baby. And how Stanley, I now realized, had been unusually distant during those exact same months. Something cold and clear settled over me. "Clara," I said quietly, "I need Thompson's contact." Clara looked at me for a moment. Then she smiled, the slow, knowing smile of a woman who had been waiting for her older sister to finally arrive at herself. She said, "I already have it." I called Thompson on a Wednesday morning. I had written down what I wanted to say the night before, 3 pages in my journal. Then I had crossed most of it out. Then I had rewritten it. Then I had prayed. Not the soft, fearful prayers I used to pray, begging God to fix my husband, but the kind of prayer that is really a declaration. The kind that says, I am done waiting for someone else to do the right thing. Thompson picked up on the 3rd ring. His voice was calm, businesslike, the voice of a man who received calls from strangers occasionally and had learned to be measured. I introduced myself. I told him who I was. I told him what I knew. For a long moment, there was nothing on the line but silence and the faint sound of an airport in the background. He was in London, it turned out, preparing to fly back to Lagos that Friday. Then he said very quietly, "How long?" I said, 18 months that I know of. Another silence. "Thank you," he said. "I will handle the rest." That was the whole conversation, less than 4 minutes. I want to tell you what happened to Stanley first, because that story is both simpler and more painful. When I sat him down that Saturday and placed the second phone on the table between us, along with printed screenshots Clara had helped me compile, the bank statements, everything, Stanley did not deny it. He was past denying things. He just sat there and looked at the table like a man who had been waiting for a wall to fall on him and was relieved that it had finally happened. He cried, real tears, the ugly kind. He said he was sorry. He said Sonia had meant nothing. He said he had been weak. He said he would do anything, counseling, fasting, Pastor Gideon, anything to save the marriage. And I listened to all of it, every word. I let him speak until there was nothing left to say. Then I opened my handbag and placed an envelope on the table next to the phone. "What is this?" he asked. "A letter," I said, "from my lawyer." His face changed. "Inena, I have been patient for 6 years, Stanley. I have been quiet for 6 years. I ended a pregnancy for you. I defended you to my mother, to my friends, to myself. I ironed your shirts. I halved my needs so yours could be full. I stood up. I am done being a good wife to a man who does not know what goodness costs." He tried to hold my hand. I stepped back. "The house," I said, "stays with me. My lawyer will explain the rest." Thompson landed in Lagos on Friday evening. By Saturday morning, Sonia's carefully constructed life had begun to come apart at every seam. I was not there for that conversation. I did not need to be. What I know from what Clara heard through her connections, that it was not a quiet confrontation, that Sonia's cool composure finally cracked, that she said things and Thompson said things, and that by Sunday, the Prado Jeep was gone from the church parking lot, and so was Sonia. She has not returned to the church since. Neither have I, for different reasons. But I heard through Rebecca, Pastor Gideon's secretary, who had become an unexpected, quiet ally, that Sunday after all of this, Pastor Gideon stood at the pulpit and preached an entire sermon about forgiveness and restoration in marriage. Not one word about accountability, not one word about the woman who had been wronged. Rebecca texted me the sermon title, "Standing Strong When Your Home is Under Attack." I read that text and I laughed for the first time in weeks. Not a happy laugh, the kind of laugh that comes when something is so predictable that outrage would be a waste of energy. I texted Rebecca back, "Find a new church, Becca. You deserve better than that building." She replied with a single emoji, a small, quiet flame.
6 months later, I am standing in a classroom in Lekki, and 32 children are looking at me like I hold the answers to everything. Some mornings, I almost believed them. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks ago. It was not clean. Divorces are not clean, no matter what the lawyers promise you at the beginning. There were days I cried in my car before school so my students would not see me walking with red eyes. There were nights I called Flora at midnight just to hear another human voice. There were moments, quiet, terrifying moments, when I questioned everything. When the voice of my mother and Pastor Gideon and every woman who had ever told me to endure came back loudly and made me feel like I was the one destroying something sacred. But then I would remember the bedroom, the blue shirt, Sonia's eyes looking at me like I was the intruder in my own home, and the questions would go quiet. The house is mine now, the court agreed. I repainted it, not because I needed to, the walls were fine, but because I needed to feel like the space was mine again, like every corner of it carried my choices, not the ghost of someone else's betrayal. I chose a warm terracotta for the living room and a deep, calm green for the bedroom. Flora helped me paint on a Saturday, and we played old music and ordered peppered snails and laughed until the room smelled like us, not like the past. Clara came the following weekend and brought a housewarming gift, a framed print that now hangs above my dining table. It reads in clean, bold letters. She decided to start living the life she had imagined. I cried when I unwrapped it. Then I hung it up immediately. My mother came to visit last month. We had not spoken much since the night she told me to stay and fix it. There had been stiff, polite calls on Sundays, the kind where two people talk around the real thing, dancing carefully at the edge of a wound neither one wants to reopen. But she came. She stood in my terracotta living room with her hands clasped in front of her, looking around the repainted walls and the new curtains and the framed print above the table, and for a long time she said nothing. Then she sat down and she said, "I said the wrong things, Nena. I was afraid, but I said the wrong things. My mother has never apologized to me in my entire life, not once, not for anything." I sat down across from her and we looked at each other, really looked for what felt like the first time in years. "Nena, I know, Mama. I know you are afraid." She reached across the table and held both my hands in hers. Her hands are smaller than mine now. I noticed that. When did my mother's hands get smaller than mine? We did not say much more. We did not need to. Some repairs are not made with words. They are made with presence, with a woman sitting in her daughter's repainted house, holding her hands, and finally choosing her side. I do not know what happened to Stanley. I hear things occasionally, the way Lagos always ensures you hear things. I am told he is well. I wish him no harm, but I also wish him no place in my story anymore. Sonia, I heard through Rebecca, has quietly relocated. Her marriage to Thompson did not survive. I felt something when I heard that. Not joy, not satisfaction, something more complicated. The awareness that there are no real winners in a story like this. Only people who find their way to solid ground and people who do not. I chose solid ground. There is something I want to say to every woman reading this who is in the middle of her own version of this story. Every woman who is standing in a doorway seeing something she cannot unsee, hearing a voice tell her to endure, feeling the weight of a church and a family and a culture all pressing down on her shoulders, telling her to be smaller, quieter, more patient. I want you to hear this clearly. Your peace is not a luxury. It is not selfish. It is not unfaithfulness to God or to your family or to your vows. Your peace is sacred. It is something you are allowed to protect with both hands. The woman who endures everything silently is not a strong woman. She is a woman who has been taught that her pain does not matter. Those are two completely different things, and we have confused them for too long. I am 31 years old. I am a primary school teacher in Lekki. I wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning. I pray, differently now, with more confidence, less fear. I cook, I laugh, I call Flora too much, and I let Clara boss me around occasionally, and I hold my mother's smaller hands. I am not the woman who stood in that doorway 6 months ago. I am the woman who walked through it. And I have never, not for one single morning since, been more fully, completely, entirely myself. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone you know, of something you have lived, share it, pass it forward. The woman who needs to hear this might not find it on her own. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and come back for the next story.